You are not chosen in a way that can be remembered. There is no moment you return to, no sentence that marked the turn. The day folds into itself, and when it unfolds again, you are already standing in different clothes. They are too light for the cold halls, too loud in color for stone walls that were never meant to notice people. The fabric smells of storage and other bodies. You think briefly that this must belong to someone else. It does not occur to you yet that you are now the someone else. No one explains the rules. They only adjust you. A hand straightens the collar, another fixes a bell so it will sound when you move. Not to guide you, to announce you. You are placed where everyone can see you, but no one has to look for long. Your presence is meant to pass through the room quickly, like smoke that clears once the air moves again. You understand this before it is spoken. You are told when to enter. You are not told when to leave. The first sound you make is not planned. It escapes you, thin and uncertain. A laugh, perhaps. Something shaped like one. It is enough. Heads turn. A pause loosens. The tension in the room shifts away from the table, the raised voices, the waiting. You feel it move onto you. No one thanks you for that. They only nod, as if confirming a tool works. From then on, your presence is requested in moments that carry weight. When words grow sharp. When silence becomes dangerous. When eyes linger too long on the wrong person. You are brought in to bend the air, to give it a shape that can be endured. You learn quickly what kind of truths are permitted from your mouth. They must arrive sideways, wrapped, reduced. If you speak too clearly, the room tightens. If you hesitate, it becomes still in a way that makes you visible. So you begin to practice not being seen. You exaggerate your movements. You lower your voice, then raise it suddenly. You let the bell speak before you do. Each sound gives warning. Each sound says, "This is not serious." That is the contract. That is what keeps you where you are. At night, you sleep in a place that is not part of the house and not outside it either. You are close enough to hear doors open, far enough to be forgotten once they close again. You replay the day without intending to. Not the laughter, the pauses before it. The way eyes searched the room until you entered. You realize something quietly without fear yet. They do not need you to be clever. They need you to be available. The weight of that settles slowly, like dust, like something that cannot be brushed away without drawing attention. You stop correcting them when they call you by the wrong name. Then you stop noticing which name it is. What matters is that you respond quickly, lightly, without resistance. That is the shape you are learning. When you're alone, your face does not return to neutral. It rests in a half expression, uncertain whether it is being watched. You practice standing still without becoming heavy. You practice breathing without sound. Tomorrow they will call again. Not because you are wanted, but because something needs to be eased. And you are learning how to be that easing without leaving a trace. You begin to understand the rhythm before you understand yourself. The days are not marked by bells or prayers for you. They are marked by summons. A pause in conversation, a look exchanged too slowly. The subtle stiffening of the room that tells someone has spoken too much or not enough. That is when they remember you exist. You are never early. You are never late. You arrive exactly when the air has become difficult. At first, you think this means you are useful. Later, you realize it means you are predictable. You learn where to stand so you can be seen without blocking anyone important. You learn which floors echo and which swallow sound. You learn how close you can approach without becoming part of the matter at hand. You are there to hover at the edge of consequence. Your body adjusts before your thoughts do. Your feet move without instruction. Your hands know when to rise, when to drop something, when to remain empty so attention does not linger. The bells on your clothing stop startling you. They become part of your balance. You measure your steps so they sound neither timid nor bold. You speak often, but you say little. Words are not your work, timing is. You interrupt arguments without appearing to. You break silences without acknowledging them. You offer remarks that carry no direction, no weight, no invitation to be answered. Laughter comes, not because what you say is clever, but because it arrives at the correct moment. You feel the room release when it happens, like breath after pressure. That release is never attributed to you. Afterward, people return to their thoughts, their plans, their disputes, as if nothing intervened. You remain standing, unsure whether to stay or withdraw. Sometimes you're waved away without being looked at. Sometimes you are ignored until your presence becomes uncomfortable and then dismissed abruptly. You learn not to flinch. Meals pass where you eat after others have finished, from what remains untouched. The food tastes the same regardless. You stop noticing. What you do notice is that conversations resume freely once you begin chewing. As if your mouth being occupied reassures them that nothing you hear will remain intact. You hear more than you should. You hear things said without witnesses in mind. You hear doubts spoken softly, cruelties spoken calmly, decisions made without ceremony. You hear the beginnings of endings before anyone else does. You do not react? That is part of your routine. At night, you repeat fragments in your head, not because you intend to remember them, but because they refuse to settle. They hover. You begin to understand that remembering is not a choice. It is something that happens when there is no one to speak to. Your body changes, not in ways that draw comment. Small things. A tension that does not leave your shoulders. A habit of smiling before you're addressed. A tendency to tilt your head as if always listening for permission. You're careful not to appear tired. Fatigue invites questions. Questions invite attention. Attention is dangerous. You learn to conserve your expressions the way others conserve resources. The routine hardens. You are present during moments that will be remembered by others as important. Later, you hear them speak of those moments without mentioning you. This does not surprise you. You begin to expect it. Your presence is not something that fits into retelling. You exist between lines. Sometimes you test the boundary. A pause held a fraction too long. A look that lingers. The room responds immediately. Someone clears their throat. Someone shifts. The air tightens. You correct yourself quickly, turning it into something harmless. You are reminded without words of the shape you must maintain. You are not punished. Punishment would acknowledge you. Instead, the routine continues, unbroken. And slowly, without ceremony, you stop wondering how long this will last. There comes a point when the routine no longer feels imposed. It feels internal. You notice it first when you are alone and still perform. A gesture, unnecessary. A breath shaped as if an audience might be near. You correct yourself, then realize there is nothing to correct back into. You no longer know how your face rests when it is not in use. People stop addressing you directly. They speak around you. Decisions are made as if you are furniture that has always been there. Sometimes a hand is placed on your shoulder in passing, not as reassurance, but as one might steady themselves on a wall without thinking. You are present too often to be noticed. The servants avoid your eyes, not out of fear, out of discomfort. You remind them that roles are not chosen. That proximity to power does not mean belonging. They hurry past you as if lingering might draw something onto them. You begin to understand that your isolation is not solitude. It is exposure without connection. You are never alone enough to rest and never included enough to exist. When you speak now, laughter comes faster, too fast. It rises before the words finish leaving your mouth. You recognize the sound. It is not joy, it is relief. They laugh because the mechanism has activated correctly, because tension has been diverted away from where it might cause consequence. You are efficient. That realization settles heavily, not because it is insulting, because it is final. Efficiency does not improve with understanding, it only repeats. Your thoughts grow quieter, not calmer, smaller. You stop forming opinions that cannot be bent. You stop anticipating futures. The idea of afterward becomes abstract, like a place you once heard described but cannot locate. You notice that your memories no longer arrange themselves in order. They float. Moments from different years sit beside each other without resistance. You struggle to remember what you believed before you learned how to be useful. Your name surfaces rarely now, and when it does, it feels foreign. Like a word from a language you once knew, but never spoke well. You do not correct people who invent new ones. Names are for those who must be called when absent. You are never absent. At night, you sit in the dark longer than necessary. Not because you're tired, because movement feels like a signal, and you have learned to minimize those. Stillness has become a skill. You practice it until it feels earned. You consider leaving once. The thought appears without urgency. You imagine walking past the gate and continuing until the sound of the bells no longer follows you. The image does not frighten you. That is how you know it is not real. You do not know where you would go without being summoned. The court changes faces over the years. Voices age, positions shift, you remain. New people learn what you are by watching how others respond to you. No one explains. Explanation would require definition. Definition would grant form. You exist because no one has needed to define you yet. Sometimes, during feasts, you catch your reflection in polished metal. The colors are familiar, the posture is correct, the expression is already prepared. For a moment, you wait for recognition to arrive. It does not, and you realize with a dull certainty that if you were to vanish between one summons and the next, the pause would be brief. Someone else would be called. The room would still breathe again. You remain where you are because remaining requires nothing from you. And nothing is now the only thing you can provide. There is no moment when it ends. No dismissal, no last command, no closing of accounts. One day, you are simply not called. At first, you assume it is temporary. A delay. A longer conversation than usual. You stand where you always stand, listening for the shift in air that precedes your summons. You remain ready. Readiness has become instinct, like balance. The sound does not come. You wait without moving, because movement would imply intention, and you no longer trust yourself with that. Time passes in a way you do not recognize. Not in hours. In stretches of quiet where nothing presses against you. Eventually, you leave the place where you are expected to be. Not because you choose to, but because standing there has lost its shape. Without the need to be eased, the room feels larger, emptier, less hostile, but also less defined. You do not know where to place yourself inside it. No one notices you withdraw. The halls feel different when you walk them without purpose. Too wide, too indifferent. The echoes do not respond to you anymore. Your bells sound out of place now, no longer announcing relief, only presence. You find yourself moving more carefully, trying to silence them. For the first time, you want to pass unheard. You consider removing the clothes. The thought remains incomplete. You do not know what would replace them. Beneath the fabric, you are not sure there is anything that can stand on its own. Days pass, or something like days. You eat when food appears. You sleep when exhaustion forces you down. Without routine, your body becomes heavy, not with age, but with uncertainty. Muscles that once moved easily through practiced gestures hesitate. Your hands no longer know where to rest. You listen more than ever, but there is less to hear. When you cross others now, they look past you with a kind of polite confusion. You are familiar without being placed. No one asks you to leave. No one asks you to stay. That is worse. Questions would give you edges. Once, someone laughs nearby, suddenly and freely. The sound reaches you before you understand it. Your body reacts out of habit. Your face arranges itself. You prepare to step forward. There is nowhere to step into. The laughter continues without you. It doesn't need to be redirected. You feel something loosen in your chest, then settle again, unchanged. You do not feel loss. Loss requires comparison. You feel irrelevance, which is quieter and harder to name. You begin spending time in spaces meant to be passed through. Corridors, thresholds, places where stopping looks accidental. You have learned how to exist where no one expects a decision. At night, you sit with the clothes folded beside you. The colors have dulled. The bells are still. You touch them once, then stop. Sound no longer grants permission. You try to remember when you last spoke without shaping your words first. The memory does not arrive. In its place comes a series of pauses, stacked so closely they resemble silence. Eventually, someone new appears in the house. Lighter, louder. Their presence bends the air in a way you recognize immediately. You understand, without resentment, what they are for. You watch from a distance as the room responds. The mechanism still works. You do not approach. There is nothing to offer that has not already been replaced. You feel no anger, only a thinning, as if something essential has been quietly removed without leaving a wound. One morning you do not rise when the sounds of the house begin. Not out of defiance, out of absence. The need to be elsewhere has faded. The need to be here has already gone. The clothes remain where they are. The bells do not ring. Somewhere, tension builds and releases again, guided by another voice, another presence. The world continues to arrange itself without difficulty. And you, who once existed to make things easier, leave without making anything harder at all. There is no marker that separates this time from the one before it. No threshold, no recognition that something has shifted. You remain, not as you were, and not as something new. You occupy space the way dust does, without claim, without resistance. The house learns how to move around you. Paths adjust, glances shorten. Your presence becomes a condition rather than an event. You are no longer summoned because nothing gathers tightly enough to require you. Tension still exists, but it disperses on its own now. People have learned other ways to endure it. Quieter ways, less visible ones. You watch without intention. Listening no longer feels like a task. Hearing has lost its weight. Sometimes you find yourself standing in a room long after it has emptied, unsure whether you arrived late or stayed too long. The difference no longer matters. Time has softened around you. It does not push. It does not pull. Your body continues its small functions faithfully. Breathing, standing, sitting. You notice how little effort they require when nothing is expected from them. Hunger arrives faintly. Sleep takes you without preparation. You wake without anticipation. You pass the place where you once waited to be called. It does not react to you. It is simply another stretch of stone. You pause there briefly, out of habit, then move on when nothing happens. You no longer rehearse expressions. Your face does not prepare itself. Whatever remains there is unshaped and unnoticed. Once you hear laughter again, close enough to feel it vibrate through the walls. You do not turn toward it. The sound no longer calls to you. It belongs to a room you are not required to enter. You understand, without clarity or emotion, that you are not being excluded. Exclusion would imply relevance. You have simply fallen outside the need for arrangement. The clothes grow thinner with use, not torn, just tired. You continue wearing them because removing them would suggest a transition, and transitions belong to stories with direction. You have none. Your thoughts, when they appear, do not stay long. They arrive without edges and leave without resistance. Memory does not insist. Identity does not argue. There is nothing left that needs to be defended. Eventually, even the idea of being forgotten loses its meaning. Forgetting requires someone to remember first. You remain where you are because there is nowhere else to continue from. The house breathes. The rooms fill and empty. Voices rise and settle. You are there, and then you are not noticed, and then it no longer matters which of those is true. Nothing ends. Nothing begins again. And the silence, which once required you to soften it, now holds on its own.